and welcome to Semana 3 of Vivas. And today we're going to be learning about nationalism, people. Let's get straight into it so we don't waste any time. So our question is, what historical trends led to the rise of nationalism? Now, nationalism, as it's defined by Benedict Anderson, is an imagined political community. And this nationalism arose in world history as an attempt to replace what had once been a very, quote-unquote, unified Europe, because of once Catholicism had fallen after the Reformation, there wasn't this unity, and so nationalism comes along to replace the unity that was there under Catholicism. And when nationalism came, it replaced what religion had satisfied for a lot of people. It gave people a legacy and a continuation after death, because someone had a national identity to form themselves under, which is really interesting. So to answer our question, what historical trends led to the rise of nationalism, although there were political communities before the Reformation, the Reformation really led to the emergence of nations and nationalism. And the Protestant Reformation and the aftermath set the stage for nationalism through three really important ways: religion, warfare, and language. And we will explore those three ways and how nationalism came to be. So first we're going to talk about religion. What did I want to talk about? So, oh yes. Yeah. So religion. Luther, I got food. Funnel cake. I'm so sorry I left so abruptly, but when funnel cake calls, you answer. I saw my neighbor walking, like carrying funnel cake, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's funnel cake night. So I had to go eat funnel cake, and that's what I did, and it was delicious. So now I'm happy, and my belly's happy, and we can continue our Viva, which I left off talking about my first point, which is religion had an impact on the rise of nationalism. So we have this Protestant reformer, Martin Luther, who was really opposed to the papacy and the hierarchy in the church. And his belief against the papacy emerged during a time and a context in which a lot of the German princes were feeling the same way. They were saying, hey, how come the Catholic Church has so much power over us? We want to be in charge. We don't want the papacy to constrain us politically. And so Luther and the princes kind of have this linkage in that they both didn't really like the papacy. And so Luther supported these princes, and he opened up the possibility of secular oversight of the church. And this is super important for the rise of nationalism. So after the Reformation, European leaders really embraced Protestantism because, in part due to the fact that it would give them this escape from the oversight of Rome and of the papacy, which gave them more centralized political power. And another way that religion really led to the manifestation, that's not the right word, that led to nationalism was these religious wars that go on after the Protestant Reformation in response to the Reformation. So between 1522 and 1648, there are a bunch of religious wars that are periodically raging throughout Europe. And in 1555, we have this really important moment. We have the Treaty of Augsburg, which states that a monarch is free to decide on his country's religion. And giving the monarch the power over a country's religion really centralizes power to the king or the ruler. And this gives religious uniformity and a mixing of religious belief and regional identity. So we're combining those, and we can see this in like Lutheranism, Christian reformers, Presbyterians, all these groups or sub-Protestant groups that also have ties to a certain region or country. So we see these ties begin to form between religion and region, and gives people a regional identity. And post-Reformation, there was a lot of diverse micro-states in Europe, and there wasn't a lot of centralized states. But princes in places like Germany started to assert their authority over issues involving religious affiliation. And after Luther, this Germanic, I can't even Can't even talk. The funnel cake. Blame it on the funnel cake. This Protestant German state is established after Luther, tying religion and region. Anyway, Luther says, quote, "The ruling princes had a right and a Christian duty to exercise supervisory powers over the church," end quote. So Luther is giving princes a lot of power over the church, and by doing this, Luther is kind of encouraging power-seeking princes to centralize and expand their power and giving them permission to do this, which could be a little dangerous because rulers like Henry VIII come along and they say, hey, look, this guy Luther gives me freedom and justification, theological justification, to do stuff like steal the church's property and plunder wealth from cathedrals and monasteries, stating that what Luther was saying, which is that princes have supervisory powers over the church. So, a growing central power gave rise to the nation-state, turning Europeans from their religious identities to a more their national identities. And we have this really interesting power dynamic going on that we see an example of the Baptist and bootlegger thing going along, playing out in history, because we have these two German states that are vying for power in Germany, and there's the Saxony state and the Brandenburg states. And Frederick III of Saxony is the Elector of Saxony, and he's a devout Catholic. Yet he supported Luther after the Diet of Worms. And this alliance was wholly political. It was not that Friedrich III supported Luther's Protestantism. It was a political move. And Friedrich did this because his political rival, Albrecht of Brandenburg, Albrecht of Brandenburg. That's not that hard to say. Wow. Anyway, Friedrich and Albrecht are political rivals. And Luther doesn't like this Albrecht guy, and that is because this Albrecht guy is selling indulgences to try to gain power in the Catholic Church. And Luther, obviously, against the sale of indulgences, that's like his main thing. He doesn't like this Albrecht guy, and so as the saying goes, enemy of my enemy is my friend. So Luther befriends Albrecht's political rival, Friedrich III of Saxony, and that is why Friedrich supports Luther after the Diet of Worms. And really, this is good for both of Luther and Friedrich, because Friedrich gets what he wants. He gets opposition for his political rival. So that is how we see religion impacting the rise of nationalism. And then secondly, we have warfare and strategy. I know how to say this word. I'm not stupid. So I was missing a T. I have strategy, but it's actually strategy. So we have warfare and strategy, which is our second point. So after the Reformation, Europe was at war, like I was saying in my earlier point. And obviously, what do you need to fight a war? You need weapons. What do you need to make weapons? Obviously metal, but you need money. That's at the root, you know? You need money. How are you going to get money? You got to pay people. And how are you going to make sure these people don't run off when you lose? And how do you make sure they're loyal to you? Well, you have to give them freedom and power that make them stick with you. So that's what the princes in the post-Reformation time were doing. They were giving their subjects freedoms and powers in exchange for their loyalty and their services in war. And so this helped promote a shared identity, which is super important for nationality and for nationalism to rise, because you gotta have something in common. And these guys were all fighting brothers, and that gave them a nationalist spirit. So yeah, everyone was at war. There was the Peasants' Revolt in 1524. There was a bunch of wars of religion from 1502 to 1598. There was the English Civil War. There was all this stuff going down all over Europe. It was a lot. And there was also the 30 Years' War, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. So the 30 Years' War was a really brutal war, one of the most brutal wars in human history. There was over 8 million casualties, and there was a lot of famine and disease that came as repercussions of this war. And this war started, the 30 Years' War started mainly as a religious conflict between Catholic and Protestant states. But over time it evolved and it became a lot less about religion and more about who was going to have more control over Europe. So Misha Glenny from BBC says, quote, "In the end, the conflict changed the geopolitical face of Europe and role of religion and nation states in society." End quote. So Misha Glenny is saying that this really impacted Europe. Religion became less important, and national identity, the importance of national identity rose. And then, so that's our second point. We have warfare and strategy. We have all that stuff going on. And then our third historical context that led to nationalism is language. I said that weird on purpose. That's with a Yorkshire accent. Don't look that up. You won't find it. They buried it. So the rise of nationalism is due to a more unified and standardized language. So if you look at anywhere in Europe, any country, Germany and England will take as examples. If you look at these places, you look at the languages pre-Reformation, and you'll see all these different dialects, all these different dialects of German and of English. It wasn't standardized yet. And so, really, how do we get to this standardized language? Well, it comes in part due to the Reformation, which standardized language through the printing press, and this power dynamic going on. And with standardized language, people are more nationally connected than they would have been. There was a lot of microstates. Like I was saying, there was a lot of microstates in Europe before the Reformation, and they all kind of spoke different dialects, which separated them. But language brings unity. That should be a quote. Language brings unity. I'm so stupid. Anyway, yeah, so powerful dialects dominated the press, and these dialects were given priority, and this made the dialects more powerful, gave power to the people that spoke these dialects, and they became the most common, widespread dialects. And also we have Latin declining. Wow. Latin's in the decline after the Reformation. We often don't remember that in the medieval and Renaissance times, there was still Latin being used in mass, being used in law. All these places, Latin was still pretty used, but there was no new Latin. It was mostly Old Latin that was being used and spoken a little bit. But after the Reformation, vernacular print language led to the death of Latin. So, yeah, reading in vernacular tongue impacted one's sense of nationality. That's something we should talk about. Yeah, you're impacted by reading all one newspaper. And that is what Christopher Muscato says. He says that, quote, "Newspapers were read daily, and, quote, since they didn't want to learn Latin, the printers acquiesced to the demands of the consumers, and newspapers were printed in local languages. This unified several dialects into one printed language read by everyone, and this standardized national language." So yeah, thanks Muscato for that. And according to Natalie Calder, literacy rates increased after the Reformation from 7% to 16%, from 1450 to 1550. So in 100 years, we get like a 10% increase in literacy, which is a good amount, you know? That's something. And this is due in part to the great reformers who were publishing their ideas in print and rapidly spreading them. So both English and German, as I was saying before, are a combination, or have been standardized. As we know them today, they've been standardized from a bunch of dialects smashed together. And we have an example of, in England, there's the Yorkshire accent, which is almost, kind of sounds like a completely new language when you listen to it, which is kind of crazy. And it's, yeah, when you compare it to like standard London dialect of English, it's very different. I'm alright, Maddie. I can't say that with a good accent, but anyway, that means I'm not happy. And then when they say, you're faffing me about, that means you're messing around with me, and we're messing around. See how different that is? That's English, guys. That's freaking English. Faffing me about. Anyway, so this is just faffing me about, and I'm alright, Maddie, about it. I should get points for that. Anyway, yeah, that is how nationalism. These historical trends: religion, warfare and strategy, warfare and strategy, and language, they all led to the rise of nationalism.